All right, well, welcome to the session for understanding how academia is fostering social innovation. My name is Ben Cipollini. I'm the engineering manager for the data insights team at Classy. And I just want to introduce our panelists really briefly. Our first panelist is Matt Segneri. He's the director of the Social Enterprise Initiative at the Harvard Business School and also a member of our host committee. Second panelist is Dr. Ayelet Genizi, an associate professor of behavioral sciences and marketing at the Rady School of Management at UC San Diego. And our third panelist is Cheryl Kaiser, the managing director of the Lewis Institute of Social Innovation at Babson College, and also on our host committee. So yeah, I'm excited to learn about how academia can really help tie together a lot of what happens in the social space. Not necessarily getting the visibility I think that it deserves. And so I'm looking forward to handing off to our panelists and hear all about what they do and how it can help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Am I projecting? Oh, I guess I am. Well, thank you for being here. As always, I love coming to the Classy Collaborative because it's one of the best convenings of social innovators in the Boston area. So I am going to open it up with 2 or 3 minutes about how does Babson really help our students amplify and accelerate social innovation? What does it look like at Babson? And I think what you're going to find on the panel is that the role of higher ed is becoming increasingly very important in social innovation, not only in terms of teaching our students, but also in terms of partnering with companies and businesses and not-for-profits, really using our campuses as social innovation labs. So at Babson, which is only a business school and has been the #1 school of entrepreneurship ever since rankings, doesn't really use the term social entrepreneurship as the only term we use. Because we're a school of entrepreneurship, we actually believe all entrepreneurship is social. How we see social entrepreneurship is through the lens of social innovation. Because our students are coming to, they're only business students, undergraduate, graduate, and corporate education. And when they come, what's most important for us is not necessarily whether they're going to start a social enterprise immediately. What's most important is that we live into what our mission says, and Babson's mission says right up front that we will educate leaders to create great economic and social value simultaneously. So this is not just about corporate social responsibility, although that's good. We actually don't believe that's good enough. We actually want our students to have a lens of what is social innovation, what is social value creation. And so what we do is we really spend time more on understanding who our students need to be, how to create and curate what we call breakthrough interactions, not breakthrough innovation, because if in fact you are in service to some kind of dilemma, some social problem, and you curate both usual and unusual suspects in terms of relationships, you actually end up with an innovative approach. So at Babson, we do a lot teaching students how to start things. They know how to start things, they know how to manage things. We teach them a lot to do, on what they need to know and what they need to do. At the Lewis Institute, we teach our students a lot about who they need to be to challenge the status quo, to start a social enterprise, to live into a space where they're creating economic and social value. And we're going to talk more about trends we're seeing and our individual programs. But I like to say that at the Lewis Institute and the Babson Social Innovation Lab, we're truly an action tank for Babson, and we create pathways not just for students, but for faculty, our corporate partners, and our community partners as well. So I'm going to turn it over for a few minutes to Ayelet to talk a little bit about her programs.
Thank you. So I'm an associate professor of behavioral marketing, behavioral sciences and marketing. I started as a marketing professor. That was my research. I got pulled quite easily into the world of social innovation by a graduate student at UCSD. And I believe that 3 years ago, I founded, and I'm now co-director of our Center for Social Innovation and Impact. And one of the greatest challenges that I encountered was trying to figure out what it is that we want to do, right? Because having another center that creates programs that go to Africa and help the homeless, that's not really something unique. And we've been going back and forth about it for quite a while. And what we came up with, and it's still a baby, 3 years old, 2.5 years old. What we acknowledged, and we think that nonprofits are, if I may say, lacking, is really more business acumen. So maybe behave less like, social enterprises and start behaving a bit more like businesses. So what we try to do, and we teach a class on social innovation for MBA students, and what we try to do is really develop an understanding and give the tools and skills that anyone who's interested in creating social change, being a social innovator, a social entrepreneur. I'm not that of an expert in understanding the exact difference between all of those, but really approach a social problem like you would approach a business problem, right? So define goals and make sure that they are measurables, and know how you're going to measure them, and know how you're going to know if you succeeded, and know how to evaluate yourself and go back in an iterative process back to the building blocks, to the drawing board. So we've been doing that for a while. Unfortunately, we don't teach social innovation as a core class. It's an elective. We have one graduate in the audience from that class. It's a life-changing experience for me, and as hopefully we will get to talk about a bit later today, I believe that there's a great opportunity, and that's why we're having this panel. There's a great opportunity for both sides, so there is a win-win-win, if you will, opportunity here for academia, as you see us, so be it like a college, undergraduate, or MBA programs, and all of you who are really in the business of changing the world. I think we have a lot to learn from you, and I dare say you have something to learn from us, and hopefully we can, make it happen.
Terrific, thank you. And Matt?
Well, first, it's wonderful to be here with you all today. In a prior life, from 2010 to 2012, I served as the late Mayor Menino's chief advisor on service and social innovation. I think you guys all saw the welcome video from Mayor Walsh. I think it's a very proud time for the city of Boston to be, what some call the Silicon Valley of social innovation and social entrepreneurship. We have so many great resident leaders here in this room today, people flying in from all over the country and the world, and I think it feels like it is really a moment in time, and there's never been a more exciting time in this work. So let me just tell you a little bit about the Social Enterprise Initiative at HBS and what we do. So we're the nexus of activity for what is truly cross-sector work. The initiative started about 24 years ago to focus on bringing business thinking and skills to the nonprofit sector. Flash forward to today, and it's much more about cross-sector solutions. Our work spans the public, private, and nonprofit sector, just as the conference does. Being one of the pioneers and leaders in launching SEI 25 years ago, what's exciting is that something that once was novel is today essential. It's a necessity. It's a core part of business schools, both in the US and abroad. Every top business school has a center or initiative or something of its kind focusing on this work. So one of the messages I think it's really important to convey to this audience is that this is no longer an ancillary or peripheral thing in schools of management and business schools. It's truly essential. 22% of our incoming MBA class has prior experience in social enterprise. 48% express an interest. And our work spans MBAs working on academics, careers, community building, launching new ventures. We run a portfolio of executive education programs, which I know some folks in the audience have attended. We work with faculty on their cross-sector research. Increasingly, we do work with our alums, because now 12% of HBS alumni work full-time in social enterprise, and we engage externally to try and spread the good word of social innovation. So it's, again, really exciting to be here. I think this is certainly a moment in time for people who are doing this work to think deeply about how they're going to affect these systemic problems. I mean, I deeply believe that, not just social sector leader, the fundamental leader of the 21st century is and must be a tri-sector athlete. No one sector can solve these problems alone. That's why it's so important to bring all the people to the table, to have collective impact strategy to solve these problems. But ultimately, we need leaders who have the facility and ability to navigate across all these different groups to make big things happen and solve these big problems.
That's great. And so I'm just going to riff off of that for a second, because Prior to coming to Babson, I ran the Center for Corporate Citizenship at Boston College, which was focused on corporate social responsibility. And prior to me leaving, we did research, and we wanted to understand what would the most senior people inside of major corporations driving social impact, driving CSR, what would the most senior position look like? What would be the skills, competencies, knowledge, attributes be? And we hired the Hay Group in Cambridge. And it was fascinating because this was about 6 years ago. And when they came back with the report, the lead investigator on that report was a woman who was also looking at what would the next presidents of Aramark Corporation looking like. And she called us up and said, you're not going to believe this, to your point. The next competencies for the leaders who lead this organization at the presidential, at the president level are just about the same skills, competencies, knowledge, and attributes of somebody who is your kind of an athlete. And that being able to, be boundary spanners, entrepreneurial thinkers, strategic thinkers, understand all sectors. But one of the things that, from a trend perspective, that we're seeing is, and I think I'm a believer that just about every sector right now is being disrupted in lots of ways, but partly how we get disrupted is we spend a lot of time listening to our students and our customers. And at the MBA level, and we're really fortunate to have some Babson students here today, but over the last year, the incoming MBA class 2 years ago came in and said, we see your mission, but we're not so sure we see that you're doing enough for us to really understand social enterprise and social value creation. And they created a group called the Usurpers. And to Babson's credit, they became truly disruptors at the graduate level, if not at the undergraduate level. And in a couple of minutes, I will ask Ross, who's here, who's one of the Usurpers. But 2 years ago, we started to say, okay, how do we deliver on this? Because our MBAs are going to leave here. They want to be that athlete, as you put it. And in our courses, we're not quite there yet. And so they pushed and they prodded and they nudged. And I would like to say that as a result of them, within 2 years, Babson has the first intensity track in business and social innovation. And that's really become, not necessarily, it's not important what it is, it's important what it does to an environment where this is becoming more and more. If you look at the Deloitte reports, if you look at what the millennial mindset wants, it's definitely beyond corporate social responsibility. It's around how do we create value, whether it's in a social enterprise or inside of companies. It's a mindset today that is not only in the social sector, but it's in the business sector as well, particularly if we're going to address the UN global goals, which are pretty much a strategic plan for the planet. If we're going to get there, we need to educate and we need to create laboratories whereby our faculty, students, and companies can work together to see how these tri-sector partnerships play out. So the trend, for us, the trend is here, and we're catching up to that trend as an academic institution.
Okay, that was a lot. So I'd like to kind of take this notion of disruption and try to think about how you can think about disruption in the context of social innovators being yourselves and academia. And I believe that everyone is speaking, so disruption is everywhere. So in the past, 4 or 5 years, this is like the buzzword. Everyone is disruptive technology, disruptive this, disruptive that. And to the extent that at least we found it, our experience is that it's a bit more challenging when you come actually, to try and implement disruption, especially in traditional or existing industries. So I might be preaching to the choir here because many of you are actually new and upcoming innovators as opposed to old school, let's call it, at the lack of a better word. But so if I said earlier that one of our goals is really to try and talk and teach, work with nonprofits and really give them the tools, the business acumen tools, right, that any businesses have and utilize in their everyday lives. That should be very simple, right? Because you go to you talk to a nonprofit and you tell them, well, here's how you can do better. Let us evaluate you. Let us see how you're doing. We can see if you're reaching your goals and whatnot, and then come up with a proposal, which we tried doing several times. I tried doing it, or I had the opportunity to do it both as independent study projects with students that work with nonprofits, as well as for my research. So I did some field experiments with companies and with nonprofits. And the big difference between companies and nonprofits, and this is not trying to step on anybody's toes here, is that whereas businesses, companies, so we had the opportunity to work with Disney, nice name to drop. With companies, they are eager to hear how they can do better. And what we found that with nonprofits, that's actually the opposite, right? So when you come to nonprofit, there's a lot of kind of stepping back and like, no, we know what we're doing. Just tell us how we can raise more money or how we can get more donors to support us and whatnot. So I don't know to what extent that applies to the audience sitting here, but if you think about academia, and academia, you can think about it in terms of undergraduate projects, MBA students projects, and MBA students are really very highly skilled, one sitting next to me here, individuals who are eager to take a project, to take a company or nonprofit and actually make it better. And by the way, also research. So one word about academic research, which I often hear the opinion or the approach of, yeah, you do your academic research, but it's completely irrelevant to the real world. And guess what? It's very much relevant to the real world, at least the kind of research that behavioral researchers do. I'm sure you all heard about predictably irrational and nudge and Freakonomics. This is all like, this is it. So what I'm trying to say is that I think there, and I'm hoping there will be more, there's a lot of room for collaboration and almost an invitation from nonprofits to call upon academia, other, whatever format, and really ask them to be disruptive. So ask us to come inside, be disruptive with whatever tools that we have. You will get the most dedicated workforce. You don't get anyone more passionate than undergrads in their 4 years in college. No one will do a better job for you, at least in terms of commitment. You'll have faculty mentoring them, and this is something that you can find. I'm not trying to promote our school or any of the other schools here. This is something you have nationwide. Whatever city that you live in, you have good people with great skills that you can harness to whatever it is that you need to do, as long as you're willing to maybe, take a back seat and see what's going on and how you're being evaluated, which is risky, but it's the only way to move forward.
Great, thank you. Matt?
So, one of the things in terms of the central question about the role academia can play, I think what, our Dean Nithin Noria at HBS captures it well in saying that, we aim to educate leaders. The HBS mission statement is to educate leaders who make a difference in the world. But I think what the important distinction he draws is that we want to educate leaders who make a difference, not just in their companies and the organizations they work at, but in their communities and in their countries. And I think there is a central role that academia, our institutions, can play in creating the next generation of leaders to take on these complex social challenges. So just 3 quick things in brief that I think academic environment can bring to the table. One is diversity of perspective. So in our MBA 2-year program, your first year class has 940 people. It's broken into sections of 90, and it's the most amazingly diverse cross-section of folks. It's truly global. It's people from all sectors and industries, public, private, nonprofit, aerospace, manufacturing, consulting, finance. And so being in that context and getting the ability to see things through the lens of people who are deeply expert in it, people who are novices, I think that's incredibly helpful to get that breadth of perspectives to better inform how you think about things. The second is proximity to problems. I think Brian Stephen is someone who incredibly elegantly talks about how important it is to deeply understand things at the ground level. So I think some of those offerings that we have, we support a portfolio of 70 summer fellows in their internships working in social enterprise roles across sectors. We have 2 courses, one, the Neighborhood Business Partnership that helps students work with small businesses in the greater Boston area. The other, the Nonprofit Clinic that works with local nonprofit organizations focused on different elements of inequality. But it's all about getting closer to things versus having that ivory tower point of view where you're taking a 30,000-foot lens. And the third, importantly, is evidence-based outcomes. I think one of the tenets that I see emerging in the social sector, and having spent 2 years on the philanthropy side working for Mike Bloomberg, who's an MBA 1966 grad, who always used to like to say, in God we trust, everyone else bring data, to make the point that we need evidence over evangelism. There's a lot of enthusiasts, there's a lot of marketing that goes on in our work, but ultimately we need real outcomes. We need to understand what works, and I think research-based institutions, faculty who do this work incredibly well and bring rigor to the understanding of these problems is an essential piece of it. So I think academia, again, is one player amidst everyone in the mix, but I think the opportunity to go through these programs, whether they be on a 2-year or 5-year basis, or some of our programs are 3 to 7 days, is the opportunity to step back from the day-to-day. And I think that is, that is one of the immense challenges of what you all are doing, because you are running at top speed at all times, and the capacity to step back, take stock of what you're doing, learn from what your peers that are doing are working well, develop mentoring relationships, whatever the specific slice of leadership and development you need, I think is a great opportunity for colleges and universities to play a role.
And to add to that, I think the great thing that universities also are tremendous brokers of relationships. They are impartial brokers. So two of the things I'd like to talk about is, one, for several years, Verizon has been a partner with Babson. And why are they a partner with Babson? One of the key things Verizon looks for is innovation in IoT technology, and they really care a whole lot about social impact. So we've been partnering with them for years on our IoT for social good. And what they do is they partner with our faculty and students. They give us resources to really work with our students to understand local context problems, whether it's in food tech, whether it's in fintech, it doesn't really matter. What they really care about is students understanding IoT technology as a solution and a scalable solution for a lot of the societal dilemmas that the UN Sustainable Development Goals deal with. So we have been their partner. They help fund our laboratories, and then what they get is they get firsthand access and knowledge to almost a pipeline of businesses and startups that are trying to solve these. And they do not ask for the IP. They really just want you to connect to the internet. They have been incredible partners in giving us technology and allowing our students to really play with that technology, and again, all towards social enterprise and social good. They also, as another trusted broker, and talk about a partnership in Boston, we have a high school program, and they funded a program for urban kids in Boston for learning the skills of entrepreneurship, coding, communications, and social innovation. And what we've been able to do is bring our methodology to the Boston Public Schools. We will be deploying Boston Public School teachers this summer. Those students will be able to use technology and entrepreneurial thought and action, our methodology, to look into their own communities and solve problems. Instead of being defined by their circumstances, we're putting entrepreneurship in their hands and social innovation to create their future. And we also have board fellows, which are MBAs that sit on not-for-profits as non-voting board members to learn what it's like to be in a social enterprise or in the social sector, and they come with the mindset of a Babson MBA who's come from the business world. They've had to have at least a minimum of 6 years before coming to Babson. So we've tried to connect more to the community as well, giving our students real, live, relevant experiences, which is what we're trying to do. To us, social innovation is, because we're not a research-based institution, doesn't mean we don't do research, but we're not a research institution. We have faculty doing research, but what we really care about is experiential learning and experiences for our students to learn real time around social innovation. And so one of the things I'd like to say, so that we then have time for questions, is what are you most proud about that you've sort of instigated or started that's really working well in terms of the role that you're playing in higher ed?
A baby, right? So starting the baby, but that doesn't get us any result. So this is not an outcome. This is still a process pride point. But being able, at least from teaching, so I've been teaching social innovation in the past 5 years to a graduate student at UCSD, and being able to isolate what the problem is, what is kind of the most important learning objectives. Cheryl and I talked about it just before we started the session, and the one student here can attest to that, is being able to take a problem, a social challenge, say hunger in Boston, and understand why it's happening. Right? So oftentimes we see, so if you ask students, anyone, you said, well, someone is very passionate about, say, hunger in San Diego, the next thing that they do, you know what it is? They start a nonprofit and they try to fix it. They don't know why there is hunger, and if you ask them, so why do you think there is hunger? They will tell you, well, because people don't have money to buy food, and you're like, okay, but why? They say, well, because you don't have a job. And you ask them again why, and they say, well, they didn't have education, and that's as far as they can go. It stops there. Now, needless to say, that's not the end. So anyone with engineering background, if there are, assuming there are a few here, knows that you're supposed to ask 5 whys, and then you're supposedly get kind of the root cause. You cannot imagine how difficult it is for MBA students, and therefore all of us, to actually do that. So being able to identify that as probably the #1 learning objective, that's something I'm not proud of, but I'm proud of being able to teach our students how to approach problems. And the other thing, and that is kind of as a side point, at least in our business school, at Radio School, talking about social innovation, no one wants to hear that. Everyone, if you start talking like tree hugging, you get huge pushback at best, right? Or people just disappear. And what I learned is just by doing. So I do research on social innovation, on social issues, on charitable giving, and on social behavior. And it's just that, just doing that. You see how contagious it is, and people just follow. They just want to be part of it. So I don't know to what extent that applies to you all, but don't preach, just do. And by doing, this is the most inspiring thing, because people can see how much you're getting done, and that's the most inspiring thing, and how much fun you're having doing it, even if it's challenging. And future to come, I don't know, we'll see what kind of generations we're able to bring and educate. Hopefully, we'll continue to be proud. Yeah.
I mean, I'd say it's sort of a mega thing, but I think I'm deeply proud, and this is, nothing significant was ever created alone. Some of this is standing on the shoulders of amazing people who built it in prior years, but I think the portfolio of SCI offerings, especially for MBAs. So I had the good fortune to be one of those summer fellows that I mentioned working at the FBI in DC. My joining the mayor's office in Boston was supported by that. We've supported almost 1,600 summer fellows, close to 200 leadership fellows who are working in full-time roles in the public and social sectors, loan repayment programs to help people do that across social sector, public sector, and now we've layered on for-profit social enterprise because that is an emergent space. The executive education programs that we offer currently to nonprofit leaders. We also just launched a new program called the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative that's going to support 300 mayors and 400 city leaders over the next 3 years to help them be more effective leaders in their roles leading cities. And increasingly, as there are more alumni in this space, some of the work that Classy is trying to do around engaging, connecting, collaborating is what we're doing as well. But I think at the heart of all this, which I think leaders in this room understand, the thing that I feel most deeply proud of on a personal level is the Social Enterprise Initiative team, most of whom is here today, because I think all of this work, again, no one does it alone. And I think fundamentally to have a team of people who are driven by the same mission you are, that are doing the hard work every day to change hearts and minds and convince folks of business being a force for social good, the importance of embarking on these career paths in the public and social careers, and working inside, as the three of us do, big, long-standing institutions for which social innovation, social entrepreneurship wasn't always there. And so some of it is serving our core audience of the deep believers well, but also mainstreaming it into the institutions. So now 12% of first-year cases have social enterprise themes. There's 12 elective classes. It's working in concert with amazing people to help change the institutions from the inside, because there's great work to be done as entrepreneurs, but I'm sure there's as many intrapreneurs as there are entrepreneurs here. And I think I just emphasize it's not always about starting the new thing. There's a huge array of space and importance around being entrepreneurs, but there's so many long-standing, incredible institutions like our own that need to evolve and shift to support this type of work. And so I just encourage you guys to think about both those pathways.
Awesome, thank you. And I think for Babson, I think what we're most proud about is, the most recent one is I'm really proud that Babson allowed our students to drive where we're moving in the future and to really showcase that social innovation and the social sector and partnerships with community and society are really important. Connection to society for a business school is critical. It not only is critical because it's the right thing to do, but it's great market opportunities for a lot of our business students. So I'm really proud that the usurpers got their intensity track. I'm really proud of our inventorship program, which sort of came out of the usurpers, and that was, rather than fellowships that exist in a not-for-profit, our student fellows could choose a not-for-profit or social sector enterprise and go and speak with the leader of that enterprise and say, what are you doing what is it you're not doing that you'd like to do? And I'm going to bring Babson's mindset of entrepreneurial thinking and acting to help you take your next step. So it isn't coming in to help with things that are ongoing. It's to say, if you wanted to do one thing or a thing to move you to the next level, what might that be? And they co-create it together. We have a student here who's doing it with Iroquois Valley Farms on really understanding and raising the awareness of the asset class of organic farming. So it ranges. We had a student work with the CEO of Grayston Bakery, which is really one of the oldest social enterprises in the country, on open hiring. And they wanted to know, how do we take our open hiring process and really scale that for community economic development around the country and around the world. So I'm most proud that it's become mainstream at Babson in the sense that people are seeking us out. It's become mainstream in that our president mentions it when she talks. We have a lot of work to do, but again, I think that the work is not inside of Babson. The work is the partnerships around Babson and connected around the world. So with that, I'm going to sort of open it up for questions in the audience in turn, either around the role of higher ed or the role of higher ed as also a not-for-profit that's going through a lot of disruption. So take any of your questions, and there are people in the audience who will bring a mic to you.
My name is Chris from Stepping Stone, and I had a quick question. You talked a little bit earlier about the importance of evidence-based outcomes, really needing evidence over evangelism. And I think we would all agree that is important. I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit more as to why that is.
I'll jump in first. I'm taking it from a funder point of view. I think the philanthropic space, certainly big foundations, being both on the side of on the philanthropy, but also sitting on the boards of nonprofits who are seeking funds. I think there's, in a competitive landscape where there's a huge array of nonprofits working across any number of different problems, there's just a much higher imperative to be able to prove that you're doing what you say you can do. I think donors are just getting much more sophisticated. They're moving from saying, I'm going to fund inputs, activities, outputs, just to show me how many books you've distributed or how many sessions you've held, to say, what is the meaningful long-term impact, or not necessarily long-term, but what is the meaningful impact that you can tangibly show me that you are affecting the problems you seek to address, and ideally affecting them at a root cause level. So some of it, I think, is spurred just by the attention of donors to this space. I also think in terms of the sophistication of, sort of data-driven decision-making, folks having more dashboards, folks collecting more real-time data, more A/B testing, more data analytics, whatever buzzword you use, I think it is easier in real time to capture the impact you're having. So I'd say, to me, those are the two threads. I don't mean to diminish the evangelism piece, because, so much of the other sessions you'll hear here and other places, the importance of storytelling is essential. You could have, you could easily operate on one pole. You could have great data but terrible storytelling, amazing stories that'll get you to a certain point, but I think you'll never be able to raise those big multi-year recurring grants unless you're showing, consistent impact in really tangible ways.
I have to add, my first question, I'm a Jew, so I'm answering with the question. That's what Jewish people do. Why not? Okay, that's my first question answer. But more importantly, I think that, so I was, 5 years ago, I was at an Ashoka conference in San Diego, and it was a 3-day event with multiple sessions, parallel sessions, all the time, all day, and it was all like inspiring and everything. There was one session on measurements, okay? Like, evidence-based essentially. And within that session that had 4 speakers, one person spoke really about measurements, the other did not. And that one person, what he said was, well, if we want academic researchers to start doing research on social innovation, what we should do is start looking, actually looking at impact, right? So kind of having actual measures that we can look at. And my question to him was, which I didn't ask at the time because I was a bit shyer than I am today, was, don't you want to know if what you're doing is working? I mean, how else do you know? How else do you know? If you're not evidence-based, all you have are stories which are nice, but they're just anecdotes, right? So what can an anecdote tell you? It can tell you a story, which could be just, just this one, idiosyncratic to that situation and that person and their story. So would you go to Apple and would Apple, produce and launch a new product based on like a story or an anecdote? No, they won't do that, and you shouldn't do that either. And it's not really, it will eventually, hopefully, become about the donors, which are, by the way, 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 way behind the curve for some reason, because you would expect them to be more business acumen, kind of. And they're very business acumen in their business life, but they're really not treating the social world in that way. It's a holistic, tree-hugging world, and they want it to remain as such. But without evidence, you're just telling stories, and we don't know if they are for real or if you actually have anything. So the only way to go is evidence-based.
The only thing I would add is, and it's more a provocative statement than it is an answer, and that is when we talk about evidence-based, we're speaking about a funder giving resources and showing that you're doing what you say you're going to do. But having been the recipient of a significant amount of resources over the last couple of years, and sometimes what we thought we wanted to look at and what we were really had a lot of desire to solve changed in the process, and the funding structure didn't allow us to actually measure what was most important to measure. So I would just say a provocative statement is that there needs to be as much disruption in the giving space and in the philanthropy space in terms of how we give, how we set up our RFPs and our systems to be able to drive the outcomes that we really want to drive. So I think that evidence-based data is really important, but I also think we have to step back and look at a very different design in the social sector for getting the outcomes that we're trying to get. Yes?
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you. First of all, my name is Hani Termanini. I'm with Karam Foundation, the U.S. Refugee Program. It seems to me that all social innovation work, all social impact work needs like one central framework where all nonprofits, all governments, all businesses should like contribute to. Like regardless how small this particular nonprofit is, the vision should be like contributing to this central global framework. So from like an academic conceptual standpoint, do you think that the Sustainable Development Goals, this United Nations framework, can serve as one neat, good framework to be this central social impact hub?
Are you referring to the framework as an approach to social problems?
I mean, exactly. I mean, like that having all social impact work, regardless like how small or big the organization is, like purposefully contributing to one of those goals.
I don't know enough about it to be able to say something smart enough about it. But my initial response is no, I don't think so. So I think the different problems, different challenges call upon different solutions and approaches. And I do think that there should be less ego and more shared knowledge, which is really, really lacking in your world. I saw it firsthand from an enterprise started by a Scripps Institute of oceanography, a climate researcher that was trying to roll out a program for cook stoves, energy-efficient cook stoves in India to reduce the production of soot. And he is a climate engineer, and his daughter is a real engineer and whatnot, climate scientist, sorry. And they worked on it forever, and then they rolled out their program, and something was not working well with it. So they had to kind of, fold back. And the one thing that bothered him, it was not anything else but, and now someone else is taking our place and is rolling their program. And I'm like, what? Why aren't you working together? I mean, how come there are literally 10 different nonprofits and NGOs that are competing to roll out their own solution for energy-efficient cook stoves in India, in the rural area. And I'm like, that's just plain stupid. It is, because what they should do is share knowledge and share experience. So I think there is a room for that. But to say that there is a silver bullet, that one solution, one framework for everything, no, I don't think so, without even knowing the framework well enough.
I think especially coming from an academic context, when you think about trying to get, let alone 250 faculty on the same page with one framework, we try not to get more sophisticated than a 2x2. But I think ultimately, I'm a big believer in sort of principle-based guidelines versus sort of, very tightly defined things. And I think from that, in part, you need people driving in the same direction. But, I use the analogy of any personal productivity book, whether you're reading Marie Kondo, Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, David Allen, Getting Things Done, it's very difficult for any one person, any organization to adopt wholesale someone else's framework. I think that's exceptionally challenging. Principle-based orientation in terms of you have the freedom and flexibility to drive towards these goals, whether it's, whether you're looking at sort of collective impact strategies where you get different organizations sort of swimming towards the same goal, whether it's reducing teen pregnancy, whether it's lowering incarceration rates, whatever it might be. I think you need to recognize the inherent flexibility that organizations need to drive towards similar outcomes. So for me, my point of view is it's always, standards that are too bright line, I think ultimately dissolve, cooperation, collaboration in some ways, because it's, often there is someone for whom that's their native language or framework, but for other folks who maybe don't buy into it wholesale, it becomes challenging to sort of deliver on someone else's framework.
Yeah, I think at Babson, I see the UN Global Goals as less as a framework and a how-to. For Babson, several years ago, our faculty got together and created something called Social, Environmental, Economic Responsibility and Sustainability. It was supposed to be a mobilizing white paper to get all of our faculty to look at social, environmental, economic responsibility, and sustainability in the context of business. And while that was good, it actually was so hard to define. So the reason the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we don't use it as a framework, but it is an organizing principle of key stakeholders that any business person should know about. They should have an understanding of climate change and poverty and infrastructure and gender issues. So the issues in the 17 goals are important that people understand, because I like to frame it as I've been told by Aim to Flourish, as the global goals are really the strategic plan for the planet, that we have to pay attention to this stuff or it's really going to be pretty bad, and we all know that. But how we deliver on that is really the Babson framework, which is using entrepreneurial thought and action for how are you going to take an action in this direction. That being said, it really does help faculty, give them something to look at and aim towards, because our faculty aren't necessarily experts in any one of those goals. They're not experts on poverty necessarily or on climate change, but it's important to understand these. For me, the only goal that matters, frankly, is number 17, which says partnership for the goals, whether it's partnership for any social problem you're trying to solve. That, to me, is the key to anything, is partnership. So I like the goals because it's a conversation piece, but it's not a framework that we actually move towards. Yes? Oh.
Hi. Hello? Hi, this is Meredith from University's Allied for Essential Medicine, and I'm really happy to see academia represented. I did have a general question about what mechanisms you have in place to ensure the affordability and accessibility of some of the products that might be generated from your work, to make sure they're available not just in the United States, but around the world for the populations who need them.
Still a baby, so I can't say much to that. So we try to make every project that we do, for example, we had a project with Project Concern International in San Diego. Because of the budget cuts and funding issues, crisis and whatnot, so they were starting to look into earned income, so models for earned income. So we did a project for them, and we learned a lot during the project. So it was 2 rounds of fellows that worked with them for 3 months, each group, each team. And there are a lot of takeaways, but some of them are really tough to share, right? Because they are really specific to the company, and it's not that we signed an NDA, but this is that nonprofit's knowledge about their models and whatnot. But we are trying to take some of those lessons learned, and not only the outcome, also about the process, how you might approach it, how you might actually approach your core business or core, let's call it business, for the lack of a better word, and try to extract or find ways to actually generate income using the capacities and the knowledge that you have. So wherever we have, we actually post online and make it available to whoever wants to download it. We are not doing active outreach. I wouldn't even know who to do the outreach to at this point, but it's available there. And as far as I know, Stanford's Social Innovation Review does the same. It's all open access. Anyone can approach anything. So I believe generally in this world of campuses and social innovation, there is more knowledge sharing than probably anywhere else in this domain.
In many cases, we have less products and more our sort of programs. So I'd say on the, for our MBA program, it has a $35 million loan support portfolio. So I think that enables access for folks who don't necessarily have, traditional for-profit sector roles or significant savings. So, for me, it was a half tuition fellowship that, as someone who had generous financial aid both in college and in business school and was the first in my family to go to college, I think it was true for folks domestically and abroad, and I think there's increasing emphasis on affordability. When I think of our executive programming, where we bring in, probably about 40 to 45% of our strategic perspectives and nonprofit management program, which is 160 executive director CEOs from all over the world who come from a week-long session in the summer. We have an array of executive education scholarships that support folks coming in who don't have the means or the budget or the training budget to pay. Similarly, we've taken that program this year to run a program in India for local executives there. The other piece, I'd say, in the generosity of the alumni community, many of our alums through their local HBS clubs around the world, and we have folks from this entity in Boston, do pro bono consulting to local organizations to bring some of their managerial talent and insights to problems in their communities. So I think it manifests itself in a lot of different ways, but I think there is a deep recognition that, wherever the school is, that being the physical school and its alumni and students, that we need to be getting proximate to those local issues and doing great work on the ground.
Yeah, and from Babson Perspective, and Lisa Thomas is here, and she runs a program particularly around the world. So every year, sometimes twice a year, we go to Tanzania and we educate hundreds of secondary school kids in our methodology, again, so they can start businesses that are affordable in their own communities and solving problems. So for Babson, what we can export is our mindset of teaching people how to be problem solvers and opportunity creators, and we do that in our fence line community here in Boston. We do it in the Barton School in Needham. We did it in Ghana and Rwanda. We're now in Tanzania. We also do things with global healthcare in Uganda. And in terms of the businesses, the social businesses our students start, the one that I'm reflecting on is Aurora Global, which is a for-profit social enterprise, but that there's an arm of it that does have micro lending and it actually builds the capacity of women in rural villages to light their villages and to create livelihoods. The model was thought about in terms of affordability, but it's a for-profit model.
To wrap up, it's 1:50 already, but thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to the panelists, please. Thanks for the questions. And I guess we're on to the next session. Thank you.